Hi there, and welcome to Transitions. I'm Anne Wagner, your host, and today we're recording at the Hunters Bay Radio Satellite Studio in Bracebridge. And it's my pleasure today to have Lauren Power from Sexual Assault Services here with me today. Welcome, Lauren.
Thanks, Anne. Glad to be here.
So, Lauren, we were talking about the work that you do and the work of the organization, and we were talking about how that also ties into women's wellness. So we were thinking maybe it might be worthwhile to sit down and talk about some of the strategies that you use in your work and through your organization and that you encourage women who come to see you to use.
Sure, Anne. So I'm just going to, for our listeners, help them get their heads around the idea of sexual violence, because sexual violence and wellness don't always seem to go together in the same sentence.
Absolutely.
So typically speaking, 1 in 3 women will experience some kind of incident in her lifetime. And usually that happens under the age of 25. So an unwanted sexual experience is the definition of an assault. And so we talk about things like on-campus assault. That's been in the news a lot lately. Many women have had experiences even as children, and I'll say also that happens to men too. And so in the journey from becoming a victim to a survivor, and we say also to a thriver, right?
Important.
Yeah. So in that journey, there are lots of healing steps to take, right? And so one of the first ones is promoting the idea that if you have been assaulted, that behavior is not your shame to carry, right?
That's a really powerful message, because how many of us have internalized that message? We should be embarrassed, ashamed, feel like it was our fault.
What did you do? Well, you shouldn't have gone out last night. What were you wearing?
Yes.
What were you thinking? Right? And all those kinds of messages that women certainly do internalize. And so one of our first messages to women is you are not alone. This happens to many, many women. Of course, we should be able to go out at night if we want. Of course, we should be able to walk anywhere we choose, right? The person who's responsible for an assault is the person doing the assault, right? And so one of the things also that many people don't know about sexual assault is that our bodies actually have a trauma response that's called the freeze response. So most of us know there's fight or flight,
yes,
right? And those are kind of familiar terms to people. You're in a bad place, something's happening, fight or flight,
yes,
and your body helps you. And most people get the idea that you don't cognitively choose, is it going to be fight? Are you going to run? Your body just reacts. And so what we don't really know quite so much about is the freeze response. So the freeze response is actually the most common response to sexual assault. And it's the response that's the most common also in any kind of relationship abuse. So when the person who's abusing you or assaulting you is known to you. And in sexual violence, that's 85% of the time.
And right? I wonder if it's part of that sense of unreality. This isn't really happening.
Absolutely. And actually our bodies release chemicals that give us that feeling of unreality, right? Mm-hmm. That's a trauma response. So that disconnection from the present, it helps mediate pain, right? It takes us a little bit away from what's happening to our body, and so it helps in that moment. And so in just teaching people about that freeze response, it also enables people to also let go of shame because they didn't run and they didn't fight.
Right. Which is the message you often get. Why didn't you?
Yes. ... Yes, if it had been me, I would have pounded that guy right in the you-know-wheres. Well, it doesn't work like that.
Right.
So
a big part of it is making women aware that this exists.
Yes. So we do lots and lots of teaching, and so we can think of it as psychoeducation, but essentially it's just learning about how does your body react with trauma, and what are the reminders of the trauma that your body re-experiences in the present. So, for example, if, let's say, 30 years ago your assault happened in a kitchen and there was a blue flowered dishcloth sitting on the kitchen sink, and you happen to focus on that dishcloth during your assault, your brain might carry that memory, so that every time from then on in you see a dishcloth that looks like that one, all of a sudden you're anxious, you're tense, you don't know why. You may feel an urge to get out of that house, right? You may be irritable, all kinds of reactions which are trigger reactions from that original assault.
And that would be frightening in the moment if you don't understand where it's coming from.
Sure, absolutely. Really discombobulating. People tell us they feel crazy. I don't understand what's happening to me. I feel crazy. Cognitively, they know they're safe, but their body is always responding like they aren't safe.
Right. So that would put a high level of stress on the body too, would it not?
Absolutely. And so we know that without this kind of, like, I'm going to say intervention, trauma intervention, women and men over time will develop some really serious health compromises because of the ongoing stress reactions that their body is putting out.
So it sounds like the first step is making people aware of what's happening within themselves.
Absolutely. And so the wellness, when we start to think about wellness, it's learning what it is, right? Normalizing what it is, right? This is a normal response to the trauma impact from the experience that they had, which was not their fault, right?
Yes.
So we know with, so I'm going to say PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, or complex or developmental post-traumatic stress disorder, which is when we see trauma in childhood while people are still developing. Those impacts can be lifelong, but there absolutely are ways to mediate that and to create much more wellness, much fewer incidents of, let's say, a full-blown panic attack from a trigger, right? So we work with women primarily in groups in Muskoka. In Parry Sound, we're still doing some individual work, but gradually that's probably going to phase out. So we tend to work with women in groups. We tend to help them feel that they're not alone. They support each other with that, right? Realizing that they have this common experience.
And I wonder, for even women who don't make it to your doorstep or haven't made it yet,
sure,
whether hearing you say these things and making them aware of how prevalent this is and how common,
yes,
will reduce that sense of isolation and being the only one.
Yes, you're not the only one. That's one of my big messages. You're not the only one. Many, many, many women have experienced something. And, if you begin to take part in some of our activities, so for example, every 6 months, we run a survivors conference in which we're bringing 50 women together, all survivors. And so it's quite profound, the impact on everybody in the room when we're all there together and we can look around and feel like, no, I'm definitely not alone.
So in addition to building that community, what else do you do in such a conference?
So usually we will have a wellness workshop. And we always have a keynote speech by a survivor. So this time we actually had two. And I'm just going to say some kudos to local women who stepped up and told their stories to us. And we had somebody singing a song as well. So typically there's a survivor doing the keynote first. This time around we had Heather McFadgen, who's a yoga practitioner, and she was teaching us about yoga for trauma. And interestingly enough, there's a lot of brain science now. I could get really nerdy at this point. There's a lot of brain science around trauma and its impacts on memory and all of the autonomic system, right? And so one of the things that yoga does is actually creates new neural pathways. So people can learn how to calm down, how to breathe, how to stay mindful and focused in the moment. And that's a huge benefit for people who have a big trauma history.
Well, this is most important and most fascinating. So we're just going to take a short break to hear from our sponsors, and then we'll be back with more of Lauren Power and women's wellness. Welcome back to Transitions. I'm Anne Wagner, your host, and I'm chatting with Lauren Power today. And Lauren, you were just telling us about the benefits of yoga and how that can help promote wellness. Are there some other strategies that you promote?
Sure, Anne. So we're always doing things on mindfulness. And so people may have heard of mindfulness. Lots of people don't exactly know what that means, but basically it's helping yourself stay in the moment, right? And I mean, this is, if you think about logically, what happens so if you've experienced numerous instances of sexual abuse, perhaps in your own home growing up, or you've been in a relationship, a partner relationship in which you could never, count on whether there was going to be violence tonight, tomorrow night, And so often people who have lived through that kind of experience are on edge much of the time, right? Their bodies don't really know how to calm down, and they're constant worriers, right?
Yes.
So they'll wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning. Insomnia is really common with trauma. The sleeplessness, addictions to kill some of the physical sensations that they re-experience. Numb out.
Yes.
Absolutely. And so one of the things that we do is work on those specific symptoms, right? So people may have particular triggers that set them off, visual, auditory, bodily triggers, somatic sensations that they experience, and those are really, really discombobulating for them. And so mindfulness will teach a way of recognizing that it's a trigger, grounding yourself in the moment with your breath, recognizing that you may not even know what it is, something in your environment has triggered you to an old assault memory, right? And in this moment, we will work with women to find the right strategy for them. So it's very individual, but there's a list, a shopping list. So for example, focusing on a favorite picture on the wall, right? See 5 things in the room. So if I look around the room right now, I can see 88.7 FM first on the dial. I can see a Pioneer Award for Linda Caro, right? I can see a picture of Lynn with a couple of students. I can see a picture of Jeff Carter and Tony Clement here in this studio. And I can see Lynn with another group of people over there. And so when I do that, see 5 things, I'm not thinking about the fearful thought I had just maybe 10 seconds ago.
So it sounds like a way to interrupt those patterns that have become familiar.
Absolutely. And so we become more mindful of being in the moment. So I do the 5, see 5, then I do hear 5 things.
Okay.
What 5 things can I hear in this moment?
So it sounds like you're giving women strategies to take control over what they're experiencing.
That's right, Anne. Absolutely.
Okay.
To begin to know what it is, recognize it in themselves, know that they aren't crazy, know that there are things they can do to help themselves, right? And then it's supporting them in the courage to take all those steps along the way. And that's why the group format really helps. Because being with your peers and recognizing that other people are struggling too.
Yes.
It's a support.
And so would you say, for instance, if someone is experiencing maybe some of the situations you've described, is this something they can also practice on their own?
Absolutely. And there's some really good workbooks out there. So, and I would encourage any of the listeners who, male or female, we do have a Facebook page. It's called Muskoka Parry Sound Sexual Assault Services. You can hunt us down. You can like us. and you will get an ongoing stream of trauma advice, awareness about sexual assault, all the things related to our program mandate. And so we try to put lots of stuff on there. So even things like a coloring template for adults. So if you're sitting and listening to something that's really difficult to focus on, the research says it's really good if you can have something, people who doodle while they're listening. We know that you don't miss any of the information, but it really helps with calming your body down while you're listening, right?
So these are definitely essential tools for someone who's experiencing the effects of trauma. But in listening to you, I'm thinking I could use that just in my everyday life when
Absolutely.
I'm getting anxious or stressed.
That's right. Right, yes. So we all, when you think about these issues, we're all on a continuum, right? So somebody who's experienced, let's say, multiple sexual assaults, yeah, that's pretty stressful. But being a university professor is pretty stressful, right? Working in your own business is pretty stressful. We all have stress, and it's how we manage it, for sure.
And I'm thinking of being a parent.
Being a
mother,
parent.
being a daughter, being a sister.
Being a neighbor.
Yes.
Right? There are all kinds of roles that we all are juggling. And so how we manage stress in our bodies, that's what we're focusing on, right? There's that whole other component of understanding how sexual assault trauma affects your body. But at the very bottom of it, it's managing stress, right? Learning how to do that okay. And relationships, right? So there's some other skills that we work on teaching that I'm not talking about here specifically. But when we think about wellness, in a holistic kind of way, and I'm saying that with a WHOLISTIC way, holistic. So it's the wholeness of ourselves, right? So our physical body for sure, right? And helping that with nutrients. If you are under constant stress, your body is very depleted of certain nutrients that it needs. And so supplementing those can also help reduce the impact too. So I want to put a little plug in for people to check out the local health stores, right? There are some wonderful supplements. So for example, and you always have to, I'm a social worker, I'm not a nurse or a doctor. So I always preface anything like this with I'm a social worker. You need to check in with a health practitioner about your own wellness and your own health. But there are some wonderful supplements that can help you with sleep, right? That can help regulate your mood. And so on the one hand, there's the medical, the pharmaceutical helps for that. And certainly there are people with trauma that are benefiting absolutely from some medication, particularly when they're beginning the journey. But as that healing journey goes on, you may be able to switch to more dietary supplements, vitamins and minerals that help. And then gradually you may be able to go off it altogether, right? So it's just to give a message of hope to people. If you've lived through some tremendous violence in your life, you probably are struggling with work, right? You probably are struggling with maybe going to school, all those challenges that are already stressful in and of themselves. They can put people who have a trauma history into complete overload.
And one of the things that I really hear that's resonating for me is you're saying there isn't just one strategy.
No.
You have a very broad approach.
Yes.
The physical, the mental, and so on and so forth. And I think sometimes as women we forget that. We get busy, we get focused on taking care of others, and we maybe let some of that fall by the wayside.
For sure. And so, I think certainly as women, often the women that are coming in to do the more intensive therapy programs are coming, once their kids are a little bit older. Mm-hmm. But we are starting to focus more on some youth strategy and outreach with youth. And so we're going to, look in the coming months for some more involvement with youth, which will be more short term. But we're really going to try to get the message out there that if you've experienced this, this was not your fault, right? And so let's lose the shame, right? End the silence, break the silence. It's okay to talk about it.
And it just makes me think, look at all the years you might be saving people of suffering.
Yeah.
If we can get to our youth and get them engaged in these conversations early.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it sounds like I'm going to have to invite you back again so we can catch up and find out what you're doing with youth as things emerge.
Thanks, Anne. Okay, and I'm going to give people our website, www.daphnewomen.com. As our website, and local phone number 705-646-2122, or you can like us on Facebook.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And we will also post that on our Facebook page if you didn't have a pen in hand and couldn't note that down. So thank you again for coming today, Lauren, and we'll be back with you with transitions next week.